Hello everyone, Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. Unless you lived under a rock, some big news dropped today for all the DC fans out there. So after the jump, let's talk the Snyder Cut. Real quick, if you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to the channel, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you will be among the first to hear about it, all right? Now, oh my God, it's happening! Look, to be perfectly honest with you guys, I don't have a dog in this fight. I don't care about the Justice League movie. Point blank, I don't think these movies have been really good. I didn't like Batman vs. Superman. I didn't like Man of Steel. So that's where I stand. So where I'm coming from, that is the viewpoint that I'm using to discuss this news. All that being said, this is some unprecedented shit that's happening right now. But also a little bit dangerous. I don't want to get to a point where fans are creating or helping shape what the media or what the original vision is for products. This one's a bit of an outlier, and I'll talk about that in a second, but we just now coming off of the Sonic the Hedgehog debacle. I mean, that thing does look hideous, though. So I don't want this to become a trend where fans can bitch and moan as much as they want on their keyboards, and then they get what they want. It's a dangerous precedent. That said, in this particular situation, Zack Snyder is old a mulligan. For those who don't know, the whole Warner Brothers DCEU thing got a little ugly there for a bit. After the reviews that came back from Batman vs. Superman, which I agree was not a good film, instead of firing Zack Snyder and removing him they let him finish. They let him go ahead and film his Justice League film. But in doing so, because of all those reviews, they had people actively on set. They had script writers there, screenwriters to kind of babysit him, to kind of mold their films into being something that they made a little bit more palatable for general audiences. That's what they're going for. They're looking at the numbers that Marvel's doing over there and kind of want to replicate that. So they were over watching, and they're like, man, we can't fire him because people don't know, just Batman vs. Superman got delayed. So its release time and the reviews that were given for it were kind of a few months before actual principal shooting for Justice League. So they fell on top of each other, not enough time to kind of switch things out, and they had a date to keep. So let's Zack film stuff. Unfortunately, some very sad stuff happened in Zack Snyder's life where he lost his daughter. And in doing so, he had to leave the filming post-production of Justice League. Warner Brothers used that as an excuse to kind of like give him the boot and get him out of Dodge. And instead of letting him either push the date back for release a little bit or let him get his mind together and come back and work on what he did for Justice League, they quickly swooped in and put Joss Whedon in there. Like, hey, you did this to Avengers. Go ahead and fix this film, or go ahead and create that, what you did there with this. And we got this weird Frankenstein movie that we got with Justice League. Oh, just to be clear, I also don't want to crap on Joss Whedon all day for this. Joss, while not in the same boat as Zack, is in a very precarious position also. He was asked to come in and do what he did from top to bottom with Avengers and do with the scraps that were left over from a film that was not quite complete from Zack Snyder and change it into a more Warner Brothers DC, what they want to envision that film to be. And when you do the halfway point, Justice League felt like a hodgepodge of a movie. You get half of Zack, half of Joss mixed together with Warner Brothers DCEU sprinkled in, and you got the mess that we got. So nobody was happy. You serve everyone, no one's pleased. So fast forward to now where we've spent a good year plus of release the Snyder Cut on Twitter and all those various news sources and social media handles ad nauseum to discuss for me. But and they finally have gotten what they wanted. What I find interesting and what's fascinating about all of this is that we've done this for a movie that was basically shunned, thrown away by Warner Brothers. Now with this joint venture with HBO, creating HBO Max, this new streaming service that's coming out in a couple of weeks, they have decided they're going to throw money that would fund 4 small independent films, 1 mid-level film, to Zack Snyder to finish and do post-production on his cut, his version of Justice League. What's interesting is that all this time people have been saying, I've been one of them, that the Snyder Cut doesn't exist. This goes to show credence that it doesn't, because if you actually have to spend $30 million to kind of finish this film, there wasn't a cut done. Now, he had a lot of materials together, he had everything set, but from my understanding and what the news is all saying is that he has to go back and do ADR, post-production, visual effects, possibly bring some folks back in to kind of redub and reshoot some things. That wasn't a cut that was done. So both people are correct. There was no Snyder Cut, but we are now getting one, which I guess both people win in that. Now HBO Max, this new thing that they've created with Warner Brothers, HBO doesn't really have a dog in the fight between the Justice League, Zack Snyder, Joss Whedon, Warner Brothers, and the fans. They just want content for their new streaming device, and no better way to kind of put out in the news that, yo, we're gonna finally do this thing that you've all been clamoring for on our streaming device. Come on through. Is it enough to buy a subscription to HBO Max? For me personally, no, because I don't have a dog in this fight. I don't really care that much about this version of this world, but what about you? Is it enough for you to be like, yeah, I'll spend my hard-earned dollars for HBO Max? Let me say this. I clearly don't have an affinity for Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, or Justice League, but I do have a human core to me, and I think that the way that they did Zack Snyder's removal on Justice League was just downright wrong. So I am glad that Warner Brothers, with the tugging and pulling of HBO, is giving Zack a chance to finish the vision that he's always wanted to do. Sorts of weird precedent, but I am curious to all the hoops, all the calls, all the shenanigans, all the negotiations that had to be made behind the scenes to make this happen. For me, what I am more interested in, because I don't care at all about this movie, I've seen a version of Justice League, I've seen what happens when Zack makes a full director's cut of Batman vs. Superman. It doesn't interest me. It just gets longer, and he has a very gorgeous visual style. Doesn't impress me as far as characters. That being said, I do think he should be allowed to finish that. And I do want to see the inner workings. I would love to get a documentary about how all of this came together, because I feel like that would be so much more interesting than the film that we get. But I know there are a lot of you guys who are all in for this Justice League movie. Like, this is what we finally wanted. Be careful though. You don't want to get your hopes up too high, because what if what you get doesn't quite pan out to what comes out on the actual HBO Max? I mean, we are in this weird thing that the hype for this has gotten so big that I think we could be in a situation where the payoff never actually equals out to what you're expecting. But I guess what's really interesting is that they're playing with the idea of making it a 4-hour flick, or breaking it down into a 6-hour or 6-episode miniseries, which would fit the formula for HBO Max and a streaming service more, where they can kind of split that up and kind of keep you coming back week to week, sort of like The Mandalorian. Me personally, considering Zack Snyder's style, it is very difficult for me to watch a 4-hour plus film of everything that is dark, muted, brooding, with no sense of like levity or hope or life to it for 4 hours straight. But if you break that up into 5 to 6 mini episodes, I can probably consume that a little better as a viewer than if I were to just take that all at once. But that's me. What do you guys think? Do you have a preference on how you want this brought out to you? Do you want it as a 4-hour plus film, or do you want it as the mini series episodes that they are toying around with doing? I'm curious to hear which one of those wins out, because I don't think there's a wrong answer. And I think you're going to get the version that Zack wants you to have either way. I just think it's more of a delivery method than it is the content itself. So all in all, I think this is a win for everybody. I know there's going to be a lot of people that are out there saying, God damn it, this freaking release of Snyder Cut tweets have finally won. But let them win. Let them have that win. Let them be celebratory about they're getting their final version, because if nothing else, even if it's bad, if it's good, whatever, you don't have to hear that tweet or hear that term ever again. You know it's coming. Release the Snyder Cut. That's a thing. But also on the flip side, there are people like me who, I am a DC fan. I love Green Lantern. Batman's my favorite character. But the world that they've given us isn't what we want. That being said, as a filmmaker, as a person who's a fan of art, who's a fan of this medium, you should allow the vision that the person who started it, you should allow them to finish it. And I think that's a fair trade-off to, yeah, you get to let the fanboys win for a bit, but also you get to let the director and humanity and the goodness of what should have been done actually come through. And then the third part that I think a lot of people are going to be watching is that this sets in a pretty big thing for all those other films that you think are like, oh, what if somebody has like a bunch of footage in the back that they didn't get to finish? Can studios now think about resurrecting, digging up the ancient graves of a bunch of old films and like, let's put these together, let's put this together, let's see what we can kind of come up with in this new form media to allow people to see a director's cut or an extended cut or another version of that film. Because this stuff's not going to ever be released theatrically. You can't do that when you've already had one version and the money and marketing has already been put behind it. But in this form, when content needs to be consumed and is thrown all over the place, give it a shot. There's no one really losing in this happening. And I think that's when you can have a win-win-win, that's sort of the best case scenario for all of this. So I'm curious to hear what everybody thinks about this huge, unprecedented news. Go ahead and leave your comments in the comments below. If you want, you can hit us up at hollywoodalreadydidit@gmail.com, or you can hit us up on Twitter at HollywoodADI. We also have a podcast with the same name on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that plays podcasts, we're there. This last episode, we talked all about Scoob, also from Warner Brothers. But I hope everyone's staying safe, being well. This is a pretty big, whether, no matter what side of the fence you lie on in response to this news, this is a pretty big piece of news. And I think everybody needs a little bit of something to take their brain off of the day-to-day activity. So kudos to you, Warner Brothers and HBO Max. And Zack Snyder, however I feel about your current filmmaking, go ahead and give him a hell with this one, all right? Later.